So let's continue. Now we need to show a loader while we create a shortened link, or to say while we add the document within the database. Now in order to show the loader, we first need to have a state. So within the shorten URL module, let's create the state with the name of loading and the function to be set loading, and by default it will be false, but for the time being let's just set it to be of true, just so that we can test the UI. Now we need to import the circular progress component from the material UI library, the same way that we did within the auth module that we have over here. And actually there's one more thing which I noticed later, that on the circular progress we are passing in a color code, which is something not acceptable by this component. It needs to have a theme color instead. So we can actually set it to be of inherit, which will work the same way for our case. So yep, we can actually copy the same thing from the auth module, and now within the shorten URL we need to do the same thing on this button. Let's do that. Well, actually we need to check, which means okay, so let's do it from scratch. So if it is loading, then we need to display the circular progress. Otherwise we want to show the message of create short URL. And let's use the same thing with the disabled prop on the button component that we have over here, just so that while we are adding the document, the button is disabled as well. So if we do that, well, that's perfect. Now we need to change the state when we make the request. So let's do that. Over here within the handle submit, what we need to do is, well, actually this thing first needs to be an async function, and then the thing is we are calling the create shorten link, this function which is coming from the account page. If we take a look, let me just split up the view. So this is the account page on the left side, and this is the shorten URL module on the right side. So we must be passing the prop of create shorten link, this thing, to the shorten URL module that we are using over here, as you can see. So this is the function which is being passed down, and within this we are making the request. So what we need to do is we need to await this function. As you can see, it's an async function, and over here we are making the request. Alright, so in order to do this within the shorten URL module, let's get over here. And by the way, we will be working on the error catching, the error handling for this async request, but we will be doing that once we deploy the application, once we actually use the real Firebase project. So over here right at the top, when this function is called, well, not at the top, instead we need to do it before we call the function, because the function will not be called if there are any errors, and we only want to toggle the set loading. We only want to change the loading state when, like, before we make the async request. So it should happen somewhere around here, to set the set loading to be of true, and then we kind of need to wrap it up inside of try catch. Let's do that right now. And now we just need to set it to be of false if there are any errors, because if there are any errors, which means that we need to show them, and if the request succeeds, which means that the module will be closed. As you can see from the account page, the account component, we are setting it to be of false, which means that the module will be closed and there is no point of changing the state then, because this thing will be kind of, this component will unmount by that time. So there's no point of setting the loading to be false. We only need to do that if there are any errors, because the module will still be visible. Now that being done, let's actually simulate the delay by wrapping it inside of the timeout in the same way. Let's do that as such, and let's wait for about 1 second. And if we do that, let's test it out. Well, actually we need to set the loading to be false initially. So if we take a look, let's add in the link. It will work for 1 second and then it will make the request and the document has been added. So that's great. That's exactly what we want to do. So that's it for the loading one. That's again the last thing off the list. And now I think we should be working on the responsiveness. And after that, we will be deploying the application. And after deployment, there will be a few things which we will be fixing, such as within the shorten URL modal, when we are calling the create shorten link, which is in turn making the request from the account component, and we are adding the document. So we will be wrapping this thing as well inside of a try catch block, because we want to make sure that the request succeeds. If it fails, we need to show the message to the user. So we will be doing that once we deploy the application. For the time being, let's work on the responsiveness that we have over here. Let me just see. So yep, there are a few things which we need to fix.